You're an agent of your own destruction. You're destroying your own ideal, and you're letting people who are weak and corrupt win. And if you stood up and stood up properly, but you have to put yourself in order to do this, at least to some degree, right? You can't do it casually. You have to do it from some position of preparedness and strength. Then what makes you think you couldn't scare them back into the corners? And that would be a good thing. And, you know, the alternative, personally, is bad because there's a psychological degeneration that goes along with it. I've seen this with many, many of the people that I've worked with who have been tyrannized in the workplace to the absolute detriment of their psychological and physical health, right? To the point of collapse, confronting these crazy, crazy things when they were sensible people. That's a terrible price to pay, man. Like, it's a bad price. And then, if the foolishness isn't dealt with at the local level, when it's still relatively trivial, then it will multiply until it's dealt with at the social level. And we're seeing signs of that already. Problems that aren't solved multiply, and soon people fight. And you know, better to argue than to fight, unless you want to fight. And some people want to fight, and I can understand why, but I wouldn't recommend it, because that doesn't lead good places. It really doesn't lead good places. So I'd say you have a duty. Maybe that's why you stand up. It's because you have a goddamn duty to stand up and just say what you have to say. You don't even have to be trying to make a point exactly or trying to get something done. It's like, this is how it looks to me. That's what that guy at Google did. He wrote this memo and he said, I talked to him today. He said, well, he went to a diversity training seminar and he thought, no, I don't agree with that. And so then they asked for feedback. So we wrote this document a month ago. This was written a month ago. Got no real response to it. Well, it bounced around inside Google until a lot of people, got interested in it, and then it escaped into the outside world. But all he was doing was, he was told a bunch of things he didn't think were true. He wrote down a bunch of things he thought were probably true. He launched that out and said, well, I think these things are probably true. It's like, well, probably they're true. Well, so he paid a price for it, but maybe we'll see what sort of price he paid for it. Man, he's going to be a lot tougher in 2 years than he was 2 years ago. So back to the personal. Like, you need to say what you think, because that's where you come from, right? And if you don't say what you think, then you kill your unborn self. That's what you do. That's what Cain did when he killed Abel. And that's why his punishment was unbearable. You have things in you that are struggling to come to the light. That's the truth you need to utter, and you need to utter that truth, because without that truth, you cannot live in the world.
I was miserable in my life. I didn't like waking up. I ain't have no purpose. I didn't know what I was supposed to be doing. On October 8th, 1985, I walked in a comedy club for the first time. Signed up for the following week. The following week, a girl took me down there. She said, you got to go to comedy club. You're the funniest person I've ever met. I never even heard of comedy clubs. I'm 27. I walked in a comedy club. I signed up for the following week. I'm going to sit here and learn. I knew I was funny. I just didn't know what to do with it. They had 10 acts go up. 9 of them went up. I didn't laugh at one joke. I was just sitting there man, I wish that was me. Man, they should have said this. Every joke they told, I knew the punchline before they said it, and I wrote a better punchline in my mind, what they should have said. It got to guy number 10, they called his name, he wasn't there. They said, well, he's not here, we're going to go to next week's list. Steve Harvey, where are you? Long story short, I won amateur night that night. I won $50. It was a 45-minute drive to my house with this girl named Gladys. I cried 45 minutes. She said, what you crying for? It ain't but $50. I said, no, you don't even understand. I was born tonight. I now know what I'm supposed to do. I went to work the next day, October 9th, and quit my job. With $50. I had nothing. I just never gave up. I'm going to tell you something. That decision cost me everything I had. I lost everything. I lost my family. I lost friends. I lost everything. I became homeless. I lived in a car for 3 years. But I just saw this. I saw this vision. I just pursued it. I said, wow, that's it. You have to take chances in life. Life is about risk. If you play it safe in life, you ain't gonna have much of a life. If you play it safe, you won't have much of a life. Life is risk. It take courage to pursue your dream. Now, it's gonna cost you something. Most people are not willing to pay what it costs to go after your dream, because you're gonna have to hurt a little bit. And most people don't like being uncomfortable. If you don't want to be uncomfortable, please do not pursue success, because success is a very uncomfortable feeling. And I learned to be comfortable being uncomfortable. Life is hard. See, for every time you have a plan, a dream, an aspiration, or a goal, do you know what happens every time you have one of those? This thing comes along called life. It happens to everybody. Life has disappointment. It's got peaks and valleys. You're going to lose somebody you care about one day. That's a valley. Somebody going to close the plant you thought was going to stay open so you could retire. That's a valley. Somebody going to fire you for an unjust cause. That's a valley. The people that got your credit card going to sell their company, going to sell their business to another credit card company. Your 18% go up to 26%. You don't even know why now your minimum didn't change, because it's life. You can stop thinking that life fitting be easy, because I got news for you, it ain't. That's a false hope to think you're going to have a wonderfully carefree life. That's unthinkable. We all live in this bubble. What you got to do, you got to put more air in your bubble.
As you're gearing up to step back into your normal life, if you haven't already done that, I thought I'd just give you 5 quick triggers, just reminders that are so simple, but these are the 5 things that I personally did when I first got kicked out of my house. Some of you know the story. My mom was a very powerful woman. I had 4 different fathers, and she kicked my dad out, and on Christmas Eve, she decided I was on his side, so she kicked me out too, and I had nothing, and I had to figure out what to do. She kept my 1960 Volkswagen. I earned $40 a week, and don't get me wrong, I love my mom, but she abused alcohol and prescription drugs, and when people do that, they're not themselves. They do little crazy things, but I am who I am because of her. And part of that was even that first step where I had to just figure out what to do with my life, but it was incredibly depressing. I have a younger brother, 5 years younger sister, 7 years younger. I love them, loves of my life. And I was separated from my brother and sister, and I'm walking in the rain trying to figure out what the hell I'm gonna do, and I'm still in high school. And so one of the things that I did is I slept on this mountaintop, and then of course it rained. And so the next day I talked to a friend, a lady friend, not a girlfriend, but a girl who was a friend. And her parents let me stay in their laundry room. And I remember I was so depressed. I don't know if you've ever been to that place where you're like wondering why you're even around or whether you should be around. It was a pretty brutal time. But what turned me around was feeding my mind. What I mean by that is about a year earlier, I'd gone to this seminar by Jim Rohn. I know many of you have heard of Jim. He's no longer alive, passed some years ago, but he was a mentor of mine. And I went to a seminar with 17, and in the seminar, he really talked about the importance of feeding your mind, and you've got to feed it because otherwise things come at you. And so I remember I took the little bit of change I had left in my pocket, and I got on a bus, and I drove, they drove me anyway on the bus for about, I don't know, it's about an hour's away from where I was, because I'd been to this place once before, had this amazing bookstore. And I figured I'll go in there and I'll just read a bunch of books while I'm in there because they can't afford any. And then I picked up a book called The Magic of Believing by Claude M. Bristol. And in this book, it talked about training and conditioning your mind and how what goes in your mind becomes the experience of your life and how to do it. And I was so depressed, I didn't know what to do. And so I went, and I'll never forget, I went back to this little laundry room, and there was a mirror there, and the book said, put your goals on the mirror so you look through your own eyes into your goals, and you see in your own eyes, and you read those goals. Do it with soap. And so I did it in the mirror. And then I made these little posters that said things like, only a loser is depressed. Now, that's not true. But I felt like I'm not a loser, and that was the leverage I had, right? I can't be depressed if the losers are depressed. And so I just try to work on everything. But gradually I started turning my life around, and I did 5 things, and I did them again. I got to tell you, and multiple times in my life when I hit really bad places, when I was told I had a tumor in my brain and that, I might die, when I buried all 4 of my fathers over the course of a year and a half and my mother. Those are rough times. They start to shift you. When 2008 happened and looked like everything was going under, and I went back and I reapplied them here at the beginning of the pandemic as well. So they're really simple. But first, of the 5 keys to transform your life, I don't care where you are, how great it is, if you can get to the next level, the first step is stand guard at the door of your mind. And I got that from my teacher, Jim Rohn. I remember he came to me one day and I was really frustrated. I was saying, I'm working so hard and nothing's really working and I don't understand it. And I was super frustrated. And remember he came to me and he said, Tony, he said, listen to me. He said, tell me what are you reading? He said, tell me who you're talking to. He said, tell me who you're surrounding yourself with. And I said, well, I'm mostly isolated by myself. And I said, but I'm so frustrated. He goes, listen to me. He said, answer this question for me. He said, what happens in the world if, let's say, your worst enemy comes by and drops sugar in your coffee? And I said, well, you'd have sweet coffee. He said, well, what if your best friend, even by accident, drops one drop of strychnine? What if it's your brother, your sister, your mother, your father, somebody you love, accidentally drops one drop of strychnine? I said, well, then you'd be dead. He goes, that's right. So remember, life is both sugar and strychnine, so watch your coffee. And what he really meant was stand guard at the door of your mind. Because today, we live in a world where the media, they're not bad people, they're good people, but they're companies. And they got to take care of their shareholders. And the only way they win is by getting your eyeballs. And the only way to get your eyeballs in a world where there's so much information is to startle you. The news is not designed to educate you or inform you. You know that. That's why it says, drinking water may kill you, film at 11. Anything that grabs you. And so we're living in a culture of so much fear. So if you're going to take your life back, you got to take into a limited amount of that media and be able to pursue it, not let it pursue you. Today, most people, in order to get your attention, we all know what they do. It's called clickbait. Let me create a headline that'll grab you. It doesn't matter if the content is even real news or not. A lot of times the headline isn't really what the whole story is, but it pulls you in. There's whole groups of people whose entire life is designing algorithms and language to make you stay online more so they can make more money, but it isn't necessarily to your advantage. So what Jim Rohn used to say to me is, he said, Tony, this is your new daily practice. Because this is what I really want to get to you guys here is if you want to keep momentum, if you join me for those few days there, the 5-6 days or 7, I guess we did for the challenge, or you went immersion with me as well. The key is to get momentum and keep momentum. If you work your tail off to get momentum going and then you drop it, oh my God, you got to start all over again. And so the way you do that is you have a daily practice. It's not like, years ago I went to a seminar by Jim Rohn and then my life was perfect. It's like I kept immersing myself in all these things, but I also made sure each day I was making some form of progress. And if you want to know what makes people happy, write down progress equals happiness. Think about it. You can achieve everything in the world and still go, is this all there is? You can achieve something and be excited, but for how long? The only way you stay happy and excited is to keep growing. Progress is everything. If you're making progress on your body, progress in your mind, progress in your emotion, you're going to feel happy. When you get there, you feel excited, but again, for how long? A year? No. 6 months, 3 months, 3 weeks, 3 days, 3 hours? Because we're not made to just sit and, be successful. We're made to grow. We're made to, then as we grow, we have something to give. So step one is, let's see if you can put a little system of standing guard at your mind. And Jim Rohn said to me back then, the number one thing you have to do is read 30 minutes a day. So never less than 20 minutes. And I'm not talking about what comes to your phone. I'm not talking about clickbait. I mean a book. I mean something that you pursue. Great ideas are never going to interrupt you.